A number of years ago, I did some storytelling near Kirkmichael, and we'd have to travel from Pitlochry along the A924, which in my opinion is one of the loveliest journeys in Perthshire. While driving up from Pitlochry, I passed this simple marker stone beside the road. The stone remembered a man called John Souter, who was found lying here on a cold winter's morning in March 1897. John was a shepherd at the farm called Strawnhavie, which still stands to this day, although it's now sadly a ruin. And I think this was the shepherd's cottage. It seems to be the only outhouse with a chimney. John had attended the market at Moulin on the 3rd of March. In the early evening, he decided to walk home through the hills to Strawnhavie, which stood about 1.5 miles from where John was found by roadman Alexander Robertson. This part of the road sits high above Pitlochry, and as you can see is very exposed and desolate. What makes this a very sad tale is John succumbed a short distance from a cottage that stands just a few hundred yards from the roadside. But in the terrible conditions and white out with the falling snow, John failed to spot this lonely building where he would have found shelter and salvation. The building is now in a very dilapidated state, but at the time John was passing, it would have been lived in, and there would have been somebody there who could have helped him if only he had spotted it.
Explore Castle Menzies after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Is it really haunted?
Book now to find out.
If you dare.
I started to think about how many people in the past have succumbed to the weather conditions in Scotland during the winter. At one time, most people would travel on foot, as only the rich had horses, and the very rich any form of cart or carriage. Here are a few stories I've collected of victims to the Scottish winter, who unfortunately have no memorial to remember them. Janet Jardine planned to travel to the farm of Borland in Southwick in Dumfriesshire to visit her son, who worked on the farm. It was to be a surprise, and Janet's son did not know his mother was coming. The weather was atrocious, with the Ardrossan and Sawcoats Herald newspaper on the 17th of March 1860 stating on the day in question that it was a hurricane, with rain on the low ground and snow in the hills. On reaching the village of New Abbey, Janet decided to take a shortcut cross-country, travelling around Criffel, the biggest hill in the area. This would take many miles from her journey. By the time Janet stopped to rest at a herdsman's house in Glen, the weather had taken a turn for the worst. The snow was falling heavily, and Janet was advised the hills would be impassable. Undeterred, the mother, desperate to see her son, left in the afternoon, with only a few hours of light left. As Janet lived alone in Maxwell Town, her neighbours assumed she had reached the farm at Borland in safety, and was enjoying spending time with her son. Her son, as I stated, was unaware his mother was not at home. On Sunday the 16th of March, 6 days after Janet had set out on her fateful journey, a servant girl was returning from visiting her mother when she found the body of a woman bent in a sitting position, but quite dead. The girl had passed that way the night before, but as it was getting dark, had seen nothing unusual. The body was taken to Borland of Southwick Farm, where Janet's poor unsuspecting son was horrified to see the corpse was that of his mother. The body had to be thawed out before it could be placed in a coffin. It seemed Janet, who was only 15 minutes' walk from her destination, had sat down to rest, fallen asleep, and died from hypothermia. The Kirriemuir bellman paraded up and down the streets, ringing his handbell on Saturday morning of the 26th of December 1874. The town official was trying to raise a search party to go out and look for a missing mailman. Charles Grant carried the mail between Kirriemuir and Gortahee. A snowstorm had raged the night before, and Grant had failed to return from his delivery of mail. But just as a group of men were assembling, someone arrived in town with some sad news. He'd found a body lying partially covered in snow a mile south of the farm of Dryborough. On the Saturday afternoon, the 9th of December 1882, a fierce storm raged in Galloway. Despite the wind and rain, a woman called Geddes left her house in Loreburn Street, Dumfries, and took a horse-drawn bus to visit her father, who lived near New Abbey village. She reached the village about 4:30, and it was getting dark. She set about the rest of the way on foot. In the darkness, Geddes missed a footbridge across a stream. In the pitch black, she wandered along the bank seeking this bridge. Wet through and exhausted, she sat down to rest, never to raise. Geddes was found the next morning, dead from exposure. The bridge she had sought in vain, only 60 feet away, and the safety of her father's front door a further 240 feet away. John Anderson had just finished working at Balmoral Castle in the winter of 1888 and headed for his father's house in nearby Crathy, a short distance away. John battled through a snowstorm, and after getting completely lost and confused in the whiteout conditions and walking for about a dozen miles, John was overcome with exhaustion and despair. He decided to try and obtain some shelter at the foot of a big rowan tree standing amongst the ruins of a cottage. John's body was found a week later. Footprints in the snow indicated that to try and keep warm, he'd walked round and round and round this tree. Unable to stand and realizing he needed to keep the blood flowing through his body, he fell to his knees and crawled round the tree until he simply could move no more. The young man was found lying on his back in the snow. His clothing, which as hypothermia set in, had been discarded, with his coat, vest and hat lying a few feet from the body. John was only 23 when he died. Mr. and Mrs. Hadfield attended a wedding reception in the Drill Hall, Lossiemouth, on the 14th of January 1955. On leaving the hall and walking home, Cynthia realised that she left her coat at the hall. She turned round and went back to fetch it, as her husband continued homewards. Mr. Hatfield started to get concerned that his wife was taking a while to return home and went out to look for her. The husband retraced the steps and soon found Cynthia lying dead in the snow. She had apparently slipped on ice and hit her head as she fell. If you've enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.